PIERRE the fictitious de CAILLE, by Anonymous. Scipio Lebrun, of Castellane, a provincial gentleman, and lord of the manors of CAILLE and of Raugon, in 1655 married a young lady called Judith Legouche. As is common in France, and also in certain parts of Britain, this local squire was best known by the name of his estates, and was commonly termed the Sieur de CAILLE. Both he and his wife belonged to the strictest sect of the Calvinists, who were by no means favorites in the country. Their usual residence was at Manosque, a little village in Provence, and their 5 children were born to them, of whom 3 were sons and 2 were daughters. The 2 youngest sons died at an early age, and Isaac, the eldest, after living to the age of 32, died also. When this Isaac, who has just been mentioned, was a lad of 15, his mother died, and in her will constituted him her heir, at the same time bequeathing legacies to her daughters, and granting the life interest of all her property to her husband. The king having revoked the Edict of Nantes in 1685, the Sieur de CAILLE quitted the kingdom with his family, which then consisted of his mother, his son Isaac, and his 2 daughters. The fugitives made their home in Lausanne, in Switzerland. In 1689, the French king, in the zeal of his Catholicism, issued a decree, by which he bestowed the property of the Calvinist fugitives upon their relations. The possessions of the Sieur de CAILLE were therefore divided between Anne de Gouche, his wife's sister, who had married 1,000. Roland, the avocat general of the Supreme Court of Dauphine, and Madame Tardivy, a relation on his own side. Meantime Isaac, the son of the Sieur de CAILLE, who was by courtesy styled the Sieur de Raugon, assiduously applied himself to his studies, and, as the result of overwork, fell into a consumption, of which he died at Vevey on the 15th of February 1696. In March 1699, PIERRE, a marine, presented 92 himself before 1,000. De Vauvray, the intendant of marines at Toulon, and informed him that he was the son of 1,000. De CAILLE, at the same time telling the following story. He said that he had had the misfortune to be an object of aversion to his father because of his dislike to study, and because of his ill-concealed attachment to the Catholic religion, that his father had always exhibited his antipathy to him, and while he was at Lausanne, had frequently maltreated him, that rather than submit to the paternal violence, he had often run away from home, but had been brought back again by officious friends, who met him in his flight, that he had at last succeeded in making his escape, by the aid of a servant, in December 1690, that, in order to avoid recapture, and to satisfy his own desire to become a member of the Catholic Church, he had formed the design of returning into Provence, that on his homeward way he had been stopped by the Savoyard troops, who compelled him to enlist in their ranks, and that he had subsequently been captured by some French soldiers. He added that 1,000 de Catinat, who commanded this part of the French army, and to whom he had presented himself as the son of 1,000 de CAILLE, had given him a free pass, that he had arrived at Nice, and had enlisted in the provincial militia, and that having been on duty one day at the residence of the governor, he had seen a silver goblet carried past him which bore arms of his family, and which he recognized as a portion of the plate which his father had sold in order to procure the means to fly into Switzerland. The sight of this vessel stirred up old recollections, and he burst into such a violent paroxysm of grief that the attention of his comrades was attracted, and they demanded the cause of his tears, whereupon he told them his story, and pointed out the same arms impressed on his cachet. This tale came to the ears of the Chevalier de la Fère, who then commanded at Nice, and after a hasty investigation, he treated his subordinate with excessive courtesy, evidently believing him to be the man whom he represented himself to be. The militia having been disbanded, the claimant to 93 manorial rights and broad estates repaired to Marseille, where he fell in with a woman called Honorée de Venel, who was residing with her mother and 2 sisters-in-law. The morality of these females seems to have been of the slightest description, and Henriette Venel had no hesitation in yielding to a proposal of this infamous soldier that he should represent her husband, who was at the time serving his king and country. Ranks of the army. The easy spouse drew no distinctions between the real and the supposititious husband, and the latter not only assumed the name of PIERRE, but collected such debts as were due to him, and gave receipts which purported to bear his signature. In 1695, he enlisted under the name of Mige, on board the galley La Fidèle, a ship in which the veritable Mige was known to have been a marine from 1676, and served for nearly 3 years, when he was again dismissed. In order to eke out a temporary livelihood, he sold a balsam, the recipe for which he declared had been given him by his grandmother Madame de CAILLE. He made little by this move, and was compelled once more to enlist at Toulon, and here it was that he met 1000 de Vouvray and told him his wonderful story. The intendant of marines listened to the tale with open ears, and recommended his subordinate to make an open profession of his adhesion to the Romish Church as a first step towards the restitution of his rights. The soldier was nothing loth to accept this advice, and after being 3 weeks under the tutelage of the Jesuits, he publicly abjured the Calvinistic creed in the Cathedral of Toulon on the 10th of June 1699. In his act of abjuration, he took the name of André d'Entrevergues, the son of Scipio d'Entrevergues, Sieur de CAILLE, and of Madame Suzanne de CAILLE, his wife. He stated that he was 23 years of age, and that he did not know how to write. The falsehood of his story was, therefore, plainly apparent from the beginning. The eldest son of the Sieur de CAILLE was called Isaac and not André. The soldier took the name of d'Entrevergues and gave it to the father, while the family name was Brun de Castellane. He called his mother Suzanne de 94 CAILLE, whereas her maiden name was Judith Legouch. He said that he was 23 years of age, while the real son of the Sieur de CAILLE ought to have been 35, and he did not know how to write, while numerous documents were in existence signed by the veritable Isaac, who was distinguished for his accomplishments. News of this abjuration having spread abroad, it reached Sieur de CAILLE, at Lausanne, who promptly forwarded the certificate of his son's death, dated February 15, 1696 to 1000. De Vouvray, who at once caused the soldier to be arrested. 1000. D'Entrevergues, who commanded the troops at Toulon, however, pretended that de Vouvray had no authority to place soldiers under arrest, and the question thus raised was referred from one to another, until it came to the ears of the king. The following answer was at once sent. The king approves the action of 1000. De Vouvray in arresting, and in placing in the arsenal the soldier of the Company of Ligonds, who calls himself the son of the Sieur de CAILLE. His Majesty's commands are, that he be handed over to the civil authorities, who shall take proceedings against him, and punish him as his imposture deserves, and that the affidavits of the real de CAILLE shall be sent to them. The soldier was accordingly conveyed to the common prison of Toulon, and was subsequently interrogated by the magistrates. In answer to their inquiries, he said that he had never known his real name, that his father had been in the habit of calling him d'Entrevergues de Rougon de CAILLE, that he believed he really was 25 years old, although 2 months previously he had stated his age to be 23, that he had never known his godfather or his godmother, that only 10 years had elapsed since he left Manosque, that he did not know the name of the street nor the quarter of the town in which his father's house was situated, that he could not tell the number of rooms it contained, and that even if he were to see it again, he could not recognize it. In his replies, he embodied the greater part of his original 95 story, with the exception of the episode with regard to Honoré de Venel, respecting which he was prudently silent. He said that he neither recollected the appearance nor the height of his sister Lisette, nor the color of her hair, but that his father had black hair and a black beard, and a dark complexion, and that he was short and stout. The Sieur de CAILLE had brown hair and a reddish beard and was pale complexioned. He did not know the height nor the color of the hair of his aunt, nor her features, although she had lived at Lausanne with the son of the Sieur de CAILLE. He could not remember the color of the hair, nor the appearance, nor the peculiarities of his grandmother, who had accompanied the family in its flight into Switzerland, and could not mention a single friend with whom he had been intimate, either at Manosque, or Lausanne, or Geneva. One would have supposed that this remarkable display of ignorance would have sufficed to convince all reasonable men of the falsity of the story, but it was far otherwise. The relatives of de CAILLE were called upon either to yield to his demands or disprove his identity, and 1000. Roland, whose wife, it will be remembered, had obtained a large portion of the property, appeared against him. 20 witnesses were called, of whom several swore that the accused was PIERRE, the son of a galley slave, and that they had known him for 20 years, while the others deposed that he was not the son of the Sieur de CAILLE, in whose studies they had shared. The soldier was very firm, however, and very brazen-faced, and demanded to be taken to the places where the real de CAILLE had lived, so that the people might have an opportunity of recognizing him. Moreover, he deliberately asserted that while he was in prison 1000, Roland had made 2 attempts against his life. He was conducted, according to his request, to Manosque, CAILLE, and Rougon, and upwards of 100 witnesses swore that he was the man he represented himself to be. The court was divided, but after 8 hours' consideration, 12 out of the 21 judges of the Supreme Court of Provence pronounced in his favor, and several of 1,096 Roland's witnesses were ordered into custody to take their trial for perjury. 3 weeks after this decision, the soldier married the daughter of the Sieur, a physician, who had privately supplied the funds for carrying on the case. This girl's mother was a cousin of one of the judges, and it soon came to be more than hinted that fair play had not been done. However, the soldier took possession of the CAILLE property and drove out the poor persons who had been placed in the mansion by Madame Roland. Honorée Venel, the wife of PIERRE, who had preserved silence during the proceedings, now appeared on the scene, all her fury being roused by the marriage. She made a declaration before a notary at Aix, in which she stated that she had unexpectedly heard that PIERRE had been recognized as the son of the Sieur de CAILLE and had contracted a second marriage, and affirmed upon oath, for the ease of her conscience and the maintenance of her honor, that he was her real husband, that he had been married to her in 1685, and that he had cohabited with her till 1699. Therefore she demanded that the second marriage should be declared void. The judges, zealous of their own honor, and provoked that their decision should be called in question, gave immediate orders to cast her into prison, which was accordingly done. The authorities at Bern meantime, believing that the decision of the provincial court, which had paid no attention to the documents which they had forwarded from Lausanne and Vevey, to prove the residence and death of the son of the Sieur de CAILLE in Switzerland, was insulting, addressed a letter to the king, and the whole affair was considered by His Majesty in council, at Fontainebleau, after the commissioners, to whom the matter was referred, had sat nearly 40 times, they pronounced judgment. The decision of the court below was upset. The soldier was deprived of his ill-acquired wealth, was ordered to pay damages, was handed over to the criminal authorities for punishment, while the former holders were restored to possession of the property.